But right at the beginning of the interview, I noticed that Passman was talking about the changes in how record labels have approached scouting artists, right? If you were to read Donald Passman's book back in the 1990s, he talked about how the way that artists got the attention of labels is an unknown artist would get an entertainment lawyer to shop the demo, right? An artist makes a demo, the entertainment lawyer shops it to a label, and if the label thinks that that artist has potential, they sign him to a demo deal, they get the A&R team and the artist development team working with that artist, and you build that artist up from zero and try to make them into a hit-making superstar. And that's obviously not the model that exists anymore. Yeah. And Passman talks about that in his latest version of the book. And in the interview with Billboard, he had this quote that I think talks about the latest trend in the way labels approach artist development. And I know you've said this same sentiment before, but I'll read it right from the article. Quote, labels are chasing artists with followings now, but the downside is that you get people who have 1 billion streams but have never played in front of a live audience. I'm exaggerating, but they don't have years on the road of developing their chops and don't have a show. Maybe they've only got a few songs. And how poignant is that, right? In the old days, labels would go after artists who could know how to work a stage, know how to play live, know how to perform in front of others. And now it's just, do they have lots of followers? Do they have a song that's popular on TikTok? But they don't necessarily know how to command a live show.
I mean, it's also about the technology. I mean, basically what's taken place, it's exactly what Passman is talking about, but there's a kind of reverse engineering that takes place artistically. Someone has a big following on TikTok. I just had dinner with 2 young women, actually, and a bunch of other people, and each one of them had 10 million followers on TikTok. And each had over 9 million subscribers on YouTube. Those are real numbers. And some of the people that were at that dinner were in the process of monetizing them and turning them into artists, essentially stepping into the shoes of being a label. So there's this reverse engineering. It's first this person, this entity, this social media particle has to have a certain energy to it, followers and a certain vibe. And then the record label looks at music, and this may be a bit of hyperbole, but the record label almost looks at music as a sort of doable afterthought, where they say, well, let's just get a song out from this person. Okay. And they get a few producers in a room, and they have Ableton, and they have Pro Tools, and they have, some toys.
Auto-tune.
And they have auto-tune, hell yeah. And so the music is sort of a spin-off from this comet heading towards Earth, this social media comet heading towards Earth. And it's super sad, actually. It's to me, it's like it's where we are, and it's maybe where we're going. So I'm not going to sit here and cry over spilt musical milk. But it's one of the most, if it's supposed to be about music, it's just not. Now, of course, eventually these people have to be lastingly talented and be able to repeat the act of making decent pieces of music. Most are not. But let's face it, if you have someone with 10 million TikTok followers and you release a tune, that person amongst the 100,000 people that are going to release a song on Spotify that day, they're the ones most likely to get 500,000 streams in the following weeks and a couple playlists, a couple editorial playlists. So it's totally bizarre. It's totally different than it used to be.
Well, and a consequence of that, though, is if you take an artist who's got a huge following and they got a song that's popular on TikTok now, but they don't have stage presence, they don't know how to run a tour, they don't know how to build a lasting fan base, record labels are just going to create a situation where they're just churning out flavors of the month, but they don't get the lasting superstar that a record label needs to survive long term. And we're seeing that in statistically, Donald Passman talks about in the interview where there are fewer and fewer artists who make the Billboard Hot 100. In other words, it's the same artists that are in the Hot 100. We're not seeing new entrants into the Hot 100 because it's all the old same superstars from when I was in college. And none of the new ones are breaking out and they're having successful careers. They're getting a little bit of success for a short period of time, but once their 15 minutes of fame are up, they don't have lasting staying power. And so you just end up with just this churn of whoever's popular on TikTok that week, and they get a record deal, but we're not creating lasting superstars that really contribute to the culture musically.
But there's one phenomenon that kind of militates against that. And I had this discussion with my manager, who manages some pretty big acts. Okay, not Taylor Swift, but people are putting 5 to 10,000 people in a room nightly. And I said, well, look, we were talking about a specific artist, and I said, listen, she stinks live. Like, she just stinks. I mean, she's like starting again in the middle of songs. She's horrible. And he sort of looked at me and said, well, you just completely don't get it, do you? And I said, well, educate, enlighten me. And he said, the fact that she has all these followers and the fact that she's playing her first few shows and they're incredibly unprofessional is endearing and relatable.
Authentic.
And authentic, right, in quotes or not in quotes, but it's real, okay? And he said people love that. And it's kind of the conflation of their social media presence and humanity with the music. And that kind of conflation forgives the lack of professional kind of presentation on the music side. So I know what you're saying, but I know what he's saying too.
No, that is a really good point. And the new media of TikTok and YouTube and things like that,
right.
It doesn't reward polish. It doesn't reward something that looks too highly budgeted, right? People want authentic stuff. People want stuff that looks like stuff that was just made in your bedroom. Even though a lot of times those videos that look like they were made authentically and cheaply and in somebody's bedroom, there's a lot of money and time and editing and team that goes into creating that work, but it still has to look like it was made by one person because that's what the audience wants. They want that authenticity. But that's a really good point, Gideon.